Keeping our communities safe is one of the primary responsibilities of government. Whenever we find ourselves lying in bed, taking a walk in the park, at work, or in a classroom, every single Canadian should be able to live without the fear of violence. And to that end, Canada has some of the strictest laws in the world when it comes to firearms. Indeed, Canadian firearm owners are among the strongest advocates for firearm safety and common sense firearms laws. To me, that makes sense. But when left-leaning governments want to be seen as cracking down on gun violence and law-abiding, or on gun violence and gang activity, it is the law-abiding firearms owners that take the brunt of their focus, and they become the target. The problem with that approach, of course, is that registered firearm owners aren't typically the ones that are committing any acts of violence. This means that a credible approach to tackling gun violence needs to focus on the criminals, on the gangs who have no regards for Canada's firearms laws and who use illegal guns in the commission of violence. Any other focus is simply virtue signaling and window dressing. The reality is that the vast majority of gun crimes that are committed with illegally obtained firearms. At least 80% of the guns used in Canadian gun crimes are illegally smuggled in from the United States. This isn't a particularly shocking fact, given that Canada and the United States have the world's longest undefended border in the world. We're also aware that it is considerably easier to purchase firearms in the US, a reality that we must recognize in any Canadian legislative response. But Bill C-21 doesn't take these facts into account. And that's why I was pleased to support my colleague, the member from Markham-Unionville, who put Bill forward C-238 to amend the criminal code to increase penalties for those alleged to be in possession of a firearm unlawfully imported into Canada, and to increase the mandatory minimum penalty for the possession of such weapons. As such, he shared during his speech on his bill when he met with community leaders and law enforcement and asked them what steps the federal government ought to take the community safer. This was his response, and I quote, "The thing I heard over and over at these meetings was that organized crime was behind the shootings, and the streets are flooded with guns smuggled from across the border. Mostly they are handguns because they're easy to smuggle, hide, and carry. That should not be shocking news to anyone. Our farmers, hunters, and sport shooters are not fueling a crime wave. The shootings are gang-related with innocent people getting caught in the crossfire." End quote. Bill C-238 was a common-sense bill that would have taken real action to address the serious issue that we're talking about today. However, the Liberals voted against it, and they actually helped to defeat it. A bill that would have imposed tougher sentences for criminal smuggling, and a bill that would have imposed tougher sentences for those who are found in possession of illegal firearms. If the Liberals had wanted to show they're serious about gun violence, they should have supported Bill C-238. And then we have Bill C-222 on the heels of this bill, Bill C-21, which was introduced by the Liberals only one day after Bill C-21. In Bill C-21, the Liberals claim to be cracking down on gun violence, and in Bill C-22, the Liberals are proposing to repeal minimum penalties for firearms-related crimes like unauthorized possession. Possession of a prohibited firearm, and weapons that have been trafficked. Discharge with intent to wound or endanger. Robbery with a firearm. These were all part of what Bill C-22 is proposing to reduce the minimum sentence for. How disconnected does one have to be to introduce a bill that supposedly will crack down on gun violence one day, and the next day introduce a bill that reduces penalties for gun crime? I speak regularly with local firearms owners. These individuals know and understand the value of well-crafted firearms legislation. They understand their responsibilities as firearms owners, and they respect the rules that are in place. But they don't understand why this Liberal government continues to target them, knowing full well that the problem doesn't lie with them, but it lies with criminals and gangs. And it's not just the firearms owners who understand this. Law enforcement voices have also raised concerns. The National Police Federation said, and I quote, "Costly and current legislation, such as the order in council prohibiting various firearms and the proposed buyback program by the federal government, targeted at legal firearm owners, does not address these current and emerging themes or urgent threats to public safety." The Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police said, "The firearms laws in Canada are actually very good right now. They're very strict. There are lots of law-abiding citizens out there who do possess guns for very legitimate purposes. When you look at steps you have to go through to possess a firearm in Canada, it's actually quite rigorous. Once you get a license, the actual purchasing, the transportation, the storage, all of that has very strict laws in Canada." And in my province of Manitoba, Winnipeg Police Inspector Max Waddell said, "While a ban on all guns might seem," and I emphasize the word seem, like a common sense approach, banning guns wouldn't necessarily stop gun violence. "I'll draw a parallel," he says. "Illicit drugs are also banned, yet we see dramatic increases in challenges around methamphetamines. Because it's that supply and demand force that causes individuals to obtain these firearms, whether it's to protect their drug trade, prevent harm, or to use it for extortion. Whatever the criminal element is needing these guns for." End quote. Further, Winnipeg Police Service spokesman Constable Rob Carver, he didn't mince words at all. He said Bill C-21 won't make any difference whatsoever. Despite the unequivocal evidence that gun violence is perpetrated by criminals using illegal guns, perhaps the most bizarre part of Bill C-21 is that it goes after airsoft guns. In rural Manitoba, chances are that you've used airsoft guns personally, or you would at least have family and friends that have done so, shooting a can from across the yard or strapping on a pair of goggles for a friendly match. As it stands, Bill C-21 will ban outright all airsoft guns, most BB guns, and some paintball models in Canada as well. This bill will destroy a pastime enjoyed by over 64,000 players across Canada and risk an industry worth $100 million to the Canadian economy. Half the businesses in Canada tailored to these harmless hobbies expect to close for good, causing some 1,500 Canadians to lose their jobs in the process. This is silly, and it does absolutely nothing to address real gun violence in Canada. Earlier this year, 36,600 Canadians signed a petition to stop Bill C-21's attempt to shut down airsoft and paintball. Among other calls, they simply asked the government to recognize that airsoft and paintball do not represent any public risk and banning it will not improve public safety. Signatories hailed from every province and territory, with Ontario and Quebec making a strong showing alongside Western provinces. Canadians are rightly frustrated with this. Why is the Liberal government's plan to take legal firearms off the ranges and ban toys? We need a bill that addresses gun smuggling. We need a bill that goes after gangs. We need a bill that prevents criminals from getting access to illegal guns, and Bill C-21, it ain't it. Bill C-21 is a smokescreen. The bill will have no impact on the illicit use of illegal firearms in crime. Criminals don't register their guns. They obtain their guns illegally. Gangs don't register their illegally obtained guns. So the Liberals propose to give municipalities the power to create local firearms bylaws. Why would we expect that this bill will have any impact on public safety?